Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the Coordinating Center's latest installment of Community Enrichment Series. Today is DEI&B, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, Strengthen Communication and Connections with Your Case Manager. Just a little bit of housekeeping first. We're going to go through the presentation, but there will be several opportunities for you to put answers in chat. But if you could remain on mute during the presentation, and then when we're finished, we will stop the recording for the question and answer portion of the session. And please understand that this is a safe place to learn. And by safe, I mean no fear of judgment. So all respectful questions are welcome. And I look forward to spending the next hour with you. So Heidi, next slide, please. So a little bit about me and a disclosure. I've been at the center for almost 10 years. 7 of those years were as a case manager, but I have a total of 17 years of case management experience. And then about 2.5 years ago, I started transitioning over to a full-time DEI&B position under Human Resources. And it has been my incredible privilege to not only just be a coworker at the center, but to serve in this position. So I want to read my disclosure to you. I speak from my own lived experiences, professional training, and knowledge gained throughout my career. I'm deeply grateful to the many individuals who have generously shared and continue to share their personal stories, perspectives, and lived experiences with me. Together, we can learn, grow, and make meaningful progress toward creating more inclusive and respectful spaces for all. And I want to especially single out or shout out to women of color who have been so gracious and patient and taught me things. I am grateful to everyone, but I want to say that the women of color have been especially patient with me during my journey and continue to teach me. So thank you. And my learning journey will never end. I have not stopped. I am continuing to unlearn and relearn, and that is my commitment, not just in this organization, in this position, but as a human. So, all right, next slide, Heidi. We're going to do a quick poll in the chat from 1 to 5 with your least amount of DEIB knowledge to most amount. Where are you on a 1 to 5 comfortable scale with this topic? We'll give you a few seconds to put that in.
Okay, so we have in our poll, we have about one person in the least, pretty even in like a 3, so 8 people, and then 1 in the 5, and then a good amount of 4s, so about 7 people.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to measure that again at the end, and hopefully you will take away at least one new, I think a friend of mine called it a spectacular nugget of information. So we're going to keep going. Next slide, Heidi. Why does today's topic matter? Because we hear a lot about DEIB in the news and hear it in conversations, but why does it matter, and why does it matter in case management? It increases cultural understanding and respect because not only are our clients from all over the country, all over the world, they may live in Maryland now, but it doesn't mean anybody started here. And we have coworkers that are from all over the country and all over the world. And so understanding each other is critical. It improves communication. It allows for more personalized care and planning because your needs or the client's needs or the patient's needs, depending on what aspect of care management you're in, you have to know that person to make sure that that person gets what they need. Because not everybody needs the exact same thing. And we're all human and want to be seen and respected for exactly who we are. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about what is DEI&B. Diversity represents all the shoes, every kind of shoes. Equity makes sure that everybody gets a pair of shoes that fits. Inclusion is feeling respected and valued whether you're wearing shoes or not. And belonging is wearing the shoes you want or going barefoot without the fear of judgment. And that's a really simple way of explaining the acronym. And you'll also hear sometimes just DEI or JDEI, which is justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And justice kind of is an overarching theme to all of the other words. So that is an easy way of breaking it down. And after the presentation, you will receive the recording and the slide deck with resources. So this is something you can use as a touchstone later if you need to refer to it. Heidi, next slide. So we're going to go through some common DEIB terms. And I know you're going to say, but Diane, how am I going to remember all these things? And I will say, just you wait. I created a document that gives you some simple definitions to these terms. But we're going to go through them. So, as if we're on a game show, let's get ready to learn some definitions. Marginalized groups. Marginalized groups are groups of people who are excluded from the mainstream based on their socio-economic, educational, cultural, many different statuses due to unequal power relationships. So marginalized groups might be based on gender. So it might be women. It might be uh, based on race, people of color. Could be on gender identity. It could be on sexual orientation. It could be on religion. Those are marginalized groups. Anti-racism is a process of actively identifying and opposing racism. It is an active state, not a passive state. The goal of anti-racism is to challenge racism and actively change policies, behaviors, and beliefs that perpetuate racist ideas and actions. Anti-racism is rooted in action. Cultural humility, and I'm going to give you just a brief description here, and then we actually have more of that in a little bit. Cultural humility prioritizes the other person, the person you're speaking with, their values, perspectives, and experiences, and listening to them, and not prioritizing your own beliefs and assumptions. So if somebody shares something and says, well, in my family, we do X, and you have to sit back and think for a moment, well, that's not how we do it in my family. But that's not what's important. What's important is how the client's family does it and how that works. So that's a little small taste of cultural humility. Privilege is an unearned advantage or benefit that some people have because of their social identity. And privilege comes in a lot of different ways. Um, I can only speak from my own experiences. I was raised in a middle class to upper middle class suburban neighborhood with very low crime, and that lens and that part of my identity leads me to have a lot of privilege. And we will get into what I do with that privilege in a minute when we cross over into allyship. Okay, so unconscious bias. Unconscious bias are learned assumptions, beliefs, or attitudes that we aren't necessarily aware of and can reinforce stereotypes. So the whole term unconscious means it's just something that automatically comes into our brain. And as human beings, as we're raised, the brain works to sort things and identify things. And even back to um, prehistoric times, brains want to figure out what is safe. And so from that hunter-gatherer, what is safe, the brain starts to do that. And as we're raised, based on how we're raised and the environment in which we're raised, those biases are formed. And we have to actively work to undo those biases or counteract those biases in our actions. So there's nothing we can do about the fact that they're there or they were there, but there are things we can do to move past them and learn from them. Microaggressions. Microaggressions are a comment or an action that suddenly and often unconsciously, going back to that unconscious bias, express a prejudiced attitude or an unconscious bias. Um, this is a relatively, I don't want to say new term in the past 2 years, but I would say in the last 10, 15 years, it's been more common. But people used to call things like backhanded compliments, like, you're fast for a girl, or you speak so well, to somebody that lives in your town and was raised in your town, but might not be white. And saying you speak so well is a microaggression, because why would you assume that somebody wouldn't speak well? So those are the kinds of things that are microaggressions. Allyship. Allyship is the practice of using one's privilege and power to support and advocate for groups and individuals who are marginalized. So I use my voice um, in advocacy for others that aren't always heard. I use my platform. I use my big mouth, but not to speak on behalf of others, but to amplify others' voices who might not be heard otherwise. And allyship is an active state, and it often gets uncomfortable. And one of the things we will touch on are uncomfortable conversations. And it's important to have those in the learning context of what we're doing. So that is allyship. Intersectionality is exactly what it sounds like. It is the intersection of multiple identities within an individual. So I don't know if I can get away with saying middle age anymore unless I'm going to be 110. So, go me. But I am a middle-aged white woman who has been married to my wife or partnered to my wife. It wasn't legal the first time we had a ceremony, but with 25 years. So um, I am also neurodivergent. I'm a grown woman with ADHD. I have multiple identities. So think about all of your identities. And if you'd like to put something in chat, if you're comfortable sharing what your multiple identities might be. And Heidi, if you could keep an eye out for that. Religion. Religion is another intersectionality of identities. Still waiting, Heidi?
Yeah, nothing in chat.
Nothing
Sorry.
yet. That's okay. We can move. Oh, here we go. Case
There it
manage. Oh, you read it.
goes. Um, case manager, mother, wife, caretaker of animals, caretaker of my aging parents.
That is true. Absolutely. We'll go. Oh, Dog mom, gay, neurospicy. There you go. Mom, partner, caretaker, ADHD. Look, see, we just had to wait a minute and they all came in. Those are great. All right, accessibility. Accessibility is the practice of making products, services, environments, and information available to as many people as possible, regardless of their abilities. So it's making sure that people, just as they are unique, have access to all the things that they need, whether that's a physical accessibility, like a ramp, or we're going to get into maybe a language accessibility. So we'll get more into that. And BIPOC. BIPOC is an acronym that stands for Black, Indigenous, and Other People of Color. It's very common in the DEI&B community, but I also have to use the disclosure that there are some people that don't care for the acronym. And because they don't want to be lumped into an other, like is it white and BIPOC? Does that it some people believe that it is not as identifying as it should be. So please remember that language is ever evolving, and as I am educated and I learn more, I do more. And sometimes that education comes from reading, and a lot of that education comes from having conversations with people and listening to people and how they identify, because that's what's important. Not me coming back to them and going, well, that's not what the definition says. That's not how we do things. If somebody says this is who I am, then I believe them. So those are some definitions of some frequently used DEI&B terms. Next slide, Heidi. All right, we're going to do a quick video on equality versus equity to give you a clearer understanding what we're talking about.
We often hear people say they want to be treated equally. Equality means sameness, and a fact for life is that we are not all the same. Some of us are older, younger. Some have physical disabilities. We have differences in gender identification, socioeconomic status, religious affiliation, and a number of differences that make us unique. If we give everyone the same thing, we're making the assumption that we all have the same needs, and the same thing will work for everyone. Equity is focused on access and opportunity because we recognize that not everyone starts out in the same place. Some have advantages that others do not. Should it be that everyone is treated the same, or should everyone get what they need based on their own situation? If we want equality, then every restaurant employee would receive the same size uniform. If we want equity, employees would receive a uniform that is their specific size. Under a system of equality, every person can park in a space at the mall. Under a system of equity, handicapped parking spaces closer to the entrance are available for those who need that type of access. Are you starting to get the point of equity? If we value everyone, we need to equip each one to be successful in all areas of society. As a result, the idea that everyone needs the same thing doesn't work. Instead, everyone needs different things to provide that access to opportunity. Equity requires a change in structures to provide access and opportunity to those that have traditionally been excluded. When everyone has access, everyone has a chance to reach their potential and contribute to society.
Thanks, Heidi. So see, there's a difference. We need to be treated in a way that makes us most able to succeed, because we're not all at the same starting line. So, okay, Heidi, next slide, please. Cultural awareness and sensitivity. This ties back to cultural humility that we talked about in the definitions. And that says sensitively. That's my bad. I apologize for the typo, and that will be corrected. Um, So we're going to do a scenario. I'm going to read you a scenario, and there is a disclaimer on the first one that this is harsh and not representative of how the coordinating center does business, but it is so that you can learn from the difference. So, Heidi, case manager. So, did you just move here? Do you speak English well enough, or do you need a translator? It's really important that you understand everything. Client responds with, I understand English, but sometimes it's hard to follow. An insensitive, culturally unaware case manager may respond with, well, you're an American now, so you'll have to get used to it. You won't have a translator everywhere you go. That's mortifying and an extreme scenario, but not unheard of. And I will say over and over, language is important and how we talk to each other is important. And being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is important. So while this is extreme and might not happen with, certainly wouldn't happen with a case manager at the center, um, people do talk to each other like this, and it's harsh. So can we go to the more culturally appropriate scenario? Case manager. So your intake form indicates that Spanish is your primary language. Do you communicate in English well enough, or do you need a translator? It's really important that you understand everything. I understand English, but sometimes it's hard to follow. Thank you for sharing that. We offer translation services at no cost. Would having a translator or extra time to discuss things help? Your comfort and understanding are important to us. That's culturally sensitive. It doesn't cost anyone anything to be kind. And you see a lot of t-shirts that say, be kind, be nice to each other. This is an example of how you can put that into practice. And you'll see in that box, pro tip, any provider that accepts Medicaid or Medicare services must provide translation services. So that is something to take with you. But and I know you're not responding to me directly, but so this is more rhetorical, but you can see the difference in how a client would feel because it takes trust to offer vulnerable things about yourself. So that's why we talk about all of these things with all of our case managers and all of our coworkers, because it's important that we all treat people like the individuals that they are, because we're not all alike. Okay, Heidi, can you go to the next one? So, inclusive communication. And this is where all of this kind of ties together. Words matter. How you say things matter. And language is ever evolving and ever changing. I think everybody attending today can think of phrases that used to be used, and you're like, oh, well, that's not appropriate anymore. That doesn't just stop with today, it is ever changing. So just because something is okay today, if somebody tells you that doesn't sit right with me, or I identify as X, or gives you feedback on their identity, it's not our place to argue. It is our place to say, thank you for the correction or thank you for the clarification. You take that as a learning moment and you keep going. And next time is different. And it costs us nothing, and it teaches each other more about ourselves and each other. So words matter. And um, accessibility is the other part of inclusive communication, whether that's translation services or large print text or documents in your own language, or can anybody put in the chat any other ways that communication might be accessible? Maybe for a physical disability?
So we have some in chat, allowing for verbal consent, text, email, a use of an interpreter, facial expressions, sign language.
Those are all great examples. So it's not body language? Absolutely. There's all kinds of accessibility and communication, and we all need different things. Closed captioning is another one. And poof, as if I thought it, I saw it pop up on my screen. Heidi said closed captioning. Listening, yes, absolutely. So it's not just in what is said, but all the different methods of saying things. Okay, could you go to the next slide, Heidi, for me? Making assumptions. Wow, do we all do that? Right? When I talked about, that's back from lizard brain, when you go safe or not safe, threat or not threat. But some assumptions in case management, and I will again speak from my experience. Um, Sometimes um, I would go into a client's home and they would look at the fourth finger on my left hand and see a wedding ring and ask about my husband, which is a normal question. And I would gently correct them and say, well, my wife, and then answer their question. And sometimes I would get a positive response. Sometimes I would get no response. But I believe in being my authentic self in all situations. And so you can't necessarily make assumptions that you're going to know. And if somebody corrects you, like I mentioned before, you say thank you and move on and learn from that. Um, Gender, you can't necessarily assume anyone's gender. Holiday and cultural celebrations. I had someone share with me that uh, they were on a client visit, and I'm not sure if it was the client or the case manager that said, Happy Easter. And the um, other person responded with, I don't celebrate Easter. And that's a learning moment that could, when I say have conversations, that could have opened up, I should, the a conversation with, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have assumed. Is there a holiday you celebrate? And then maybe take that as a learning opportunity. I don't celebrate Easter. I celebrate Happy Spring, and we have a spring dinner. Um, but it opens up, don't be afraid of being wrong. It opens up conversations. And those conversations are where we learn more about each other. Family structures and dynamic. Family is different for everybody. That idea of the Leave It to Beaver family is while there are still what Leave It to Beaver families represented, there are more and more and more that don't. So be aware of family structure and dynamic. Can you think of anything else we may assume? You can put that in chat if you have anything you want to put out there.
So we do have that gender and pronouns are often assumed. Developmental status, assumption that the mother is the primary caregiver.
Oh, great. Those are all great ones. Assuming a child is biologically theirs, another good one. Gender roles, absolutely. Gender roles are kind of tough in my house with two women. If we stuck to that, the yard would never get mowed. Fathers are marginalized because questions are often posed to the mother. That is a great one. Thank you for sharing. Assuming the relationship between two people. Absolutely. All right, Heidi, next slide. DEI&B in case management. Why is it important for my case manager to embrace this? Why is it so important that we believe our coworkers should know all of this? Because you or the client or the patient or whatever your case management situation is in order for you to receive the most appropriate services, you have to know about the person as an individual. What does it mean for you as a participant or a client? That your case manager cares about you as a person and not just a case number or a diagnosis or a single identity. And why should you incorporate it into everyday life? Because you want to be seen and heard. Other people want to be seen and heard. Other people that may not look like you, sound like you, talk like you, love like you. Everybody wants to be seen and heard. So we are going to go to the next slide with the poll again at the end of our conversation and say 1 to 5, how's your knowledge now? General knowledge. And we will wait for Heidi to round up our results.
Okay, it looks like we have 3, 4s, and 5s. So we've definitely grown. We have about 66% participated. We had about 80 last time, so we'll wait a little bit longer. So about 3 at a level 3, and then even split with 4 and 5, each having 7.
Fantastic. We'll take it. It means most people walked away with something, and that was my goal. All right, could we go to the next slide? That's a lot. I gave you a lot of information in 36 minutes. Oh, I'm so excited to see the answers to the poll. We didn't even have any 1s or 2s anymore. Everything came in at 3, 4, and 5. That's amazing. And a lot of information. So we're going to go to the summaries next. And shortly we will cruise into our Q&A. So next slide, Heidi, please. Be authentic. Be you. There's nobody else you can be, so just be you. Share your unique needs. Use your voice. Appreciate others' individuality. Don't make assumptions. And try and foster an environment of belonging. And what that means is if you walked into somebody's living room, how would you want them to make you feel? How would you want to feel when you're there? So keep those things in mind. We have some resources that we're going to put up on the screen next that you will get in the recording and the slide deck later for inclusive language in the workplace and various DEI&B resources. And with that, we have ended the presentation portion. And when Heidi is ready, we will stop recording and we can move into our questions and answers. Thank you for your attention today.